Randall, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's wonderful to have another guest, Randall Avery. I think we connect. I don't actually remember when we actually connected, but I remember when I did reach out to you, I saw that you had like all this accolade. I said, "Oh my God, this guy is probably spending so much time in school, just learning and just constantly just improving yourself." So, I know you have the CFA, you have the CFP, you have your own practice going on. So I figured that you have a wonderful story to share, and I wanted to make sure that you had this moment to highlight your story and just, share with my audience in terms of how you got to where you are and what are some of the things that you're working on.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I love the fact that you're explaining the Black experience as far as the investment industry. I think few people take note of that. So I'm excited to be on today.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So, like before we actually get started, one of the things I like to do with some of my guests is I want to start with some of my guests. I want to start at the very beginning, right? Because I think that is very important to truly understand how you were just growing up, and what some of the things that you have to cut. I want to. It's gonna flow. So, all right. So, before we actually begin, I really want to start from the very beginning to truly understand some of the obstacles that you had to overcome as a child to get to where you are. So, please, tell us about your childhood growing up.
Yeah, so I grew up in the Atlanta metro area. It's a suburb of Atlanta on the east side of Atlanta. It's called Stone Mountain, Georgia. And a lot of people first recollection of Stone Mountain, Georgia was during Martin Luther King's speech when he said, "Ringing hills from Stone Mountain, Georgia." And I'm sorry, let me repeat that. Sorry about that. All right.
Sure.
So I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, a suburb in Stone Mountain, Georgia. And a lot of people's first recollection of Stone Mountain, Georgia is when Martin Luther King mentioned the states. But we have a long history in Stone Mountain, Georgia. And Atlanta is a special place. A lot of people think of Atlanta as a place of Black excellence. So, what was unique about me growing up was I never saw a cap on what my potential could be. And I also feel like having, I had awesome family, parents still together today. I also had two brothers. I was the middle child, and I also grew up in a large family. So I was surrounded around love, but it was a place where it offered the opportunity for challenge, and it offered the opportunity for me to always think I could be whatever I wanted to be.
You know, as you talking about that, and I'm thinking about just your surrounding in terms of growing up and having your family in place and just your surrounding in general because like you said, right, Georgia is known to have some of the most successful Black individual across many different industries, right? So you had that representation that you could possibly look at, say, hey, you know what, maybe I could be that person one day, or maybe I could be better. I'm curious, when you finally left Georgia, when you actually decided to visit other state, like was it somewhat of a culture shock for you?
Yes. So when I was an internal auditor, and we'll go a little bit more into that, we actually traveled to different states, different distribution centers. So when
Hmm.
I go to different states, I got to see how different cultures lived, how you were perceived by other people, and it wasn't always bad. So let's not get that wrong. There's other parts of the country that are just as well received for African Americans as Georgia, but it was different. You did feel more like a minority. When growing up, I felt like we were actually the majority, even though we still are the minority in Georgia. But everywhere I looked around, in every position that touched anything, whether it was a doctor or a lawyer, a scientist, anything you could think of, there was somebody who looked like me. But when you travel to another state, you really realize there's just not that many of us, especially the operations and the things that I were doing. There was a lot of times I never came into contact with one of us. So you really felt like a minority once you've traveled outside of Georgia.
I mean, do you travel often?
Not often as I used to. I used to get around a lot because I was internal auditor.
Hmm.
I do travel with family a lot. We have this thing with my family where I'm in Atlanta, so we're big Atlanta Falcons fans. So we'll travel to different states to follow the Falcons play. But I don't travel too often. I probably get around to probably about two states per year.
Okay.
But it's when I go to different states, of course, this food is number one. try to
Mhm.
eat the best food
Yeah, you gotta have the food.
I can. But I really want to see how the culture actually operates. I don't want to go to the tourist location. I want to talk to the people. How's your day to day going? And that's kind of my goal when I travel.
So I'm curious, like when you was a child, were you always had that mindset in terms of, just really, um, I don't know, just like being curious and figuring out, okay, like I want to see like if I could do this. I want to see if what this place could take me to. Like, I mean, like let's start over. Like, how were you as a child?
So I was a mischievous child. So I grew up as the middle child. So I
Mhm.
had an older brother and younger brother, and I got to mess with them both at all times. I also really was a headstrong individual. I got into a lot of trouble for a lot of things I said. Very little of what I did. I pretty much told the line. I was still raised. I felt right. So I did what I was supposed to do, but I always expressed my ideas, and
Mhm.
I enjoyed people challenging my ideas. My problem as a child was I used to challenge adults, and that doesn't always go well in the South when a child challenges adults. So I received a lot of trouble along those lines. But looking back, that was the catalyst to me, challenging what I thought. Because when I was challenging somebody, it didn't mean I didn't believe what they thought. I really wanted to hear their rebuttal, what they
Mm.
believed, and what they were passionate about. And that's what I was trying to garner. And as I got older, I realized how to control that and do that in a more tasteful way.
So, how many people actually told you you should have become a lawyer?
A lawyer was something that I thought about. The problem, and it's funny how we think about different professions, because my younger brother's a lawyer. Um, I was not big as far as reading when I was younger.
Mm.
Nowadays, I read a lot more than pretty much a lot of people that I know in my circle. But when I was younger, reading was not my thing. I was very big into math, solving problems. So the concept of reading law literature for hours upon hours, that didn't suit well with me. But I'm always curious about the law. That I would not be surprised just because I'm bored when I'm 60, I go to law school.
It's funny, like how your life could take such a change, right? I mean, you say that you were not really big at reading, but we're gonna touch more about that. You have a book, right?
Yes.
You probably had to read over 10,000 pages to get all your certifications. So you certainly did a lot of reading. So like, what were some of the challenges or significant event that you experienced as a child that really shaped you to be where you are today?
Yeah, I think there were two main ones. There's a lot of events here, but it's really hard to nudge them down into a couple of events. But one was I was a part of a program called M to M, which has a horrible name, which means minority to majority. What that meant was we had a strong disparity in DeKalb County where certain schools were doing better than other schools.
Mhm.
So somebody came up with the bright idea. I'm not sure how bright it was. They were going to ship people who were regions of lower performing schools and send them all the way up, and this is to the northern part of the city, to better performing schools. And my mom decided that, hey, this was a good idea, so she signed us up. The culture shock of going from where I was, it was probably 90% African American, then going to something that was more 40% white, 10% others, and then 50% African American, that shock made me think about the world differently.
Hmm.
And they test different, they talk different, they teach different. My first year, I did struggle a little bit, but once you got the hang of it, it was important. And also think the standards and the expectations of every student in that school made you want to work a little bit harder. When I was in my previous school, receiving a B was just good enough,
Mhm.
right? But going into this other school, if you didn't receive an A, the question was, what was wrong? And I think what you're surrounded around and how people challenge you is important. And I would say the second thing, and the reason probably I'm an entrepreneur today, is my dad actually went out on his own and tried to, he was in IT, tried to go out and make a business for himself. He partnered up with a couple people. And seeing my dad take that chance, seeing my dad take those risks, I think was important to me because it made me realize that it was possible
Mhm.
to do that.
So let's go back to when you actually made that transition to go to another school, and you came across all these different obstacles. I'm curious, how were you able to adapt to these changes? Like, what were some of the things that you had to do? Did you feel like you had to change who you are as a child? Just walk us through your process.
I think the number one thing was I used to be able to coast through class. So it had to switch. I actually had to study.
Hmm.
Um, the schools were still 50% African American, so I didn't have to change who I was. But I just think academics was a higher priority than other things as far as athletics are just being known in the community. Because I'm going to a community outside of where I live,
Hmm.
it was very little about who I was and more what I could achieve in the classroom. So I didn't have to change. I think I just had to apply more pressure to a different area of my life, which was academics.
Okay. And your parents, and you mentioned your dad was in IT and he decided to start his own business. Like your mom, was she also in IT, or what was your mom role at that time?
My mom was heavy in administrative, so she was an office manager at a major university here in the Atlanta metro area. So she's been there for 20 years. So she was more in kind of like the administrative side of the world.
So you could see why education was such a important thing within your family. Because you know what? Not too many African American growing up have that educational base as in terms of parents, right?
Yes.
That they will, some of them they will say, hey, make sure you go to school, but they don't really understand the roadmap because they didn't finish school themselves, or they don't have an idea of what that roadmap look like, right? So for your mother to be able, or even your father, right, to have that roadmap, have that level of understanding, saying that, hey, look, we have to get your education. You have to be better. And your dad going on his own, starting his company. I don't know if it was successful or not, but but we could touch on that if you would like. Uh, just like when your dad was starting the business, I know that sometimes, right, especially if as a startup, the dad will bring the kids along to work with them. Was that some of the things that your dad had to do? Like, did you had to come and work with your dad?
Yeah, so we were able to go to work with my dad, and it was IT. So one of the big things all IT companies had at that time was a ping pong table. And I
Okay.
thought that was the coolest thing. My dad, when he goes to work, and play ping pong at any time he wanted to. And my ping pong skills really accelerated then. But I think it was the mixture of the work environment and also the flexibility of time. My
Mhm.
dad was able to go to my football games because he can get off because he can work to 10 o'clock at night if he decided to. So it was just that because my dad went out on his own, he could be more present in the things that were important to me.
Hmm.
And which is strange is because both my parents do not have a college degree.
Wow.
Um, so it wasn't an environment where college was the ultimate solution. Our education was the ultimate solution. It was more of just be excellent at what you do and go figure that out. And that's what led me to my decisions and the colleges that I went to and my career choice.
That is extremely important because we have conventional education and you have unconventional education, right? Conventional where you go to the traditional school system. Unconventional is where you just pick up YouTube, right, or you pick up a book and you learn the skill set that you need in order for you to do a job efficiently. And many fathers and mothers, or even parents, right? They say, "Hey, go to school," and I think that a lot of people have ingrained that in their mind that in order for you to be successful, you have to go to a university or you have to get a master degree. Where, in the other hand, surely what you really need is a skill set, right? It's a skill set and being having the ability to do something very well and better than the next person. So for your parents to be able to have that approach, I think that's very unique because you don't really see that, especially in our culture. You don't see that often. So
And it's tough to receive when you're young because you just want somebody to say, tell me what to do,
yeah.
right? When you're younger. But my parents were like, no, you figure it out. We gave you an environment to succeed. You decide what you want to succeed. So at the end of the day, it it was your decision. You decide if that's the right pain point you want to press.
Okay. So now we know the start of your educational experience, especially as a child, at least the push to further yourself. And we have a now a much better clarity in terms of your childhood. I want to move to the educational side from the university standpoint. Let's talk about your educational experience and the reasons behind double majoring in accounting and finance. I think that's very unique because not too many people go to college and say, hey, I want to go ahead and double major in accounting and finance, which are the backbones of it. Like accounting is the backbone of finance. So for you to even make that decision, so let's talk about that. How was your educational experience and your university educational experience?
So when I was growing up, like I said, I was a middle child. I didn't mind rattling the feathers of anything, but I did enjoy being extremely conservative when it came to money. And
Hmm.
that led to also my college or early on career decisions. So at first I wanted to be an accountant. Feel like it's pretty easy to get a job. I enjoyed numbers. I enjoyed studying about money. Accounting makes the most sense.
Hmm.
But I took it was like a Finance 3000 course, and I fell in love with the concept of compound interest. And
Mm.
even today, I'm like, why weren't they teaching us this and sharing this information to us when we were younger? Since then, I've been sold and I was 100% finance. But because I thought I was going to be an accountant, I just took all my extracurriculars in accounting at that time. I also felt this was around '07, about to go into '08, that there was going to be an looming recession coming. There
Mm.
was whispers on college campus, and a lot of times colleges hear a lot of things first. So they were saying, "Hey, the job market's not looking too good. Things were slowing down." It was beginning to be kind of like a cap on business going up.
Hmm.
So that's why I decided, well, at worst, I can have a degree in accounting and finance. I decided to go back to finish my accounting degree when I was at my first job, which was an internal audit, which we can talk about a little bit later on.
Yeah. So I think that's very unique, right? Because your initial steps was accounting, and usually accounting have a much safer net, I would say, when it comes to like job security, because ultimately everybody need an accountant. Not everybody need a financial advisor. Some people feel like, hey, you know what, I'm gonna figure it out. But everybody need an accountant, whether you like it or not, right? We gotta file our taxes and we gotta do our things, our audit, especially for larger corporation. And for you to be able to analyze that and realize that, hey, you know what, there's a possibility that I may not have a job if I choose to go a different route. So accounting makes sense. And you mentioned your interest in compound interest, which also happened to be one of your sections of your book, which we're going to talk about later on. Um, so what? Okay, you okay? Hold on, give me a minute. So, how did you position yourself to succeed after graduating, especially during the 2007 2008 market crash?
So around that time, it was whispered around the campus, like we spent so much time in school, how we're going to find a job? Whisper, whisper, whisper. Throughout my college years, I've always applied to different internships, and pretty much any job that would hire me, I would hop on. I probably had about 6 jobs before I graduated college, so I touched and done a lot of different things. So the activity and the behavior to find a job, which probably as you can see look on my resume, I still have had a lot of jobs even after college. I knew very well how to apply for a job. So even before I graduated, I began to apply different jobs in internships, hoping that somebody would take a chance on me. So, luckily enough, there was a company in the Atlanta metro area, one of the world's largest paper manufacturing companies. They actually took a chance on me. And I told them, I was like, hey, you do realize I'm not going to graduate for another semester. They said, as long as you can do the work, we'll allow you to come on board. So I was one of the few who were able to work a full-time job, receive a full-time salary while still in school. So it was an amazing experience. I can write the script better. And that job really changed my mind a lot about a lot of things. And I hope we're going to talk a little bit about what it is working in a recession, because I think that really formed the way I think about work, careers, and how I help people plan out their career.
So let's talk about that, right? I mean, especially you still in college, you're juggling full time position.
Yep.
It's a recession,
Yep.
right? And you're still going to school and you're working a full time. I mean, that's a lot, right? So let's talk about that. Like, how were you able to position yourself during a recession and while still going to college and juggling all those pieces together?
So I tell every college student this secret, the hands down secret to college is going to summer school.
Mm.
It's easier to get to receive a good grade. It's less work overall. Teachers are a little bit more laid back, and you can actually get ahead. So by the time I was in my last semester of college, I only had 3 courses to take. Okay. And then when you work, yes, you work 40 hours, but you have a lot of other time that you can do things like study. So it was a lot looming over my head. Even so, we had conversations in school whether we're going to get jobs, but even inside of a workplace, you're having conversations about, hey, are we going to get laid off? Is this the department? Is this going to be the day? So going through work and seeing people laid off, you can imagine that that can warp somebody's view of corporate life, especially early on.
So, what was the feeling like when you actually saw? I don't know if you had a chance to see the first person let go, but going through that emotional experience, what was going through your mind?
And it still stings today. So I was working in internal audit, and a gentleman, he kind of, took me under his wing. It was another brother. We were real close. And he'd come by my cube and say, hey, how you doing? And I got to know him. I got to know his family, what he cared about, his progression. He'd been in the company for over a decade. He was well loved.
Mhm.
One day we showed up in the office one morning. We were escorted to a conference room, and they said, hey, we had to let this gentleman's apartment go. He didn't receive any notice. And in my mind, I was like, he had family. Like, how, if he did this much service, the next day you can walk up to him and say, hey, your services are no longer needed because we've made a corporate decision. That didn't sit well with me. And it allowed me to become even more conservative financially and focus more on, if that ever happened to me, I would be okay.
So, you think that when somebody is in that position and they don't have the financial secure to be able to waver through the storm, what what do you suggest them to do? Like, how do they overcome that level of obstacle knowing that they have a family to feed? I'm not sure if you had a family at that time or if it was just yourself, but I'm assuming you come across clients that are in jobs that are extremely volatile, and they may or may not have financial security in terms of like liquid assets, and yet if anything get disrupted, that could potentially affect them. Now, granted, your practice is really truly focused on the healthcare. We're going to talk more about your practice later on, which is a little bit more defensive. But just overall, for those who gone through or is going through a turmoil, because 2020, right, when COVID happened, a lot of people lost their job, a lot of people didn't have savings. Like, how would you position someone to be able to weather through that storm?
Yeah, so as they say, sometimes the best defense is a really good offense. So the number one thing is just having three to 6 months worth of living expenses. I prefer, especially if you're in an income bracket, let's say you make over $120,000 per year, those jobs do not come around day in and day out. So if you make a high income, make sure you aim for at least a year's worth of living expenses in cash or short term security. The second thing, and the thing that a lot of people don't focus on, is you should make sure that your skills are up to date and you are continually marketable. One of the things I have for my clients is I make sure that they update their resume every single year and say, hey, this is what I've done this year, and let me notate it, because when the time happens and you're laid off, it's really hard to update your resume when you're feeling depressed. The second thing I recommend my clients do is, even if you're not looking for a job, go ahead and apply for different jobs. See if you receive a call back. And I would go as far as go on the interview, because you may be surprised what they offer. So I think the best way is really, instead of being defensive, is be offensive, really thinking about your skill sets, being proactive in your I guess network, as far as networking with people who potentially could have jobs for you. Your career is not just go into the office, grind it out, and become a good employee. Your career is also making sure that you are employable towards the future. So you won't be like my friend at the paper manufacturing company, where he walks in the office one day and he's laid off, and now he has to look at his kids, his wife, and say, I don't know where the next dollar is coming from. And I think that's an important lesson that people don't talk about, and they don't talk about it in college, but it is a real part of life. There will be a time in your life where you're not working, and how you manage that will determine a lot about your trajectory of your career.
That's crazy because like when you go through that level of experience, it's one thing to hear it, but actually experiencing it is a different level, right? And not too many people, especially advisors now, actually taking that step to say, hey, look, yeah, I'm managing your money, but let's figure out ways to make sure that we secure the money that's coming in, right? Let's figure out ways continuously updating your level of skill set to be able to stay up to date in terms of like changes with technology, or if it changes in the industry. So that is extremely important, and I think that makes you very unique. I think so, because I don't hear that often. So kudos to you.
Yeah, when I network with different advisors, I'm surprised that they don't touch these things. But these things are a little sticky. It's a little icky. It's soft. It's personal. It's easy to say, "Hey, you received an 8% return this year. Congratulations. Go buy yourself a new Mercedes Benz." But I want people not only to have a lot of money, and a lot of my clients do have a lot of money. I want them to enjoy their money. Even smile if they receive a layoff because they know that an opportunity is coming across the other side. And that goes with other life events that could happen in your life. And to me, that's really just enjoying life. And I don't want to grow wealth, like I said. Can I help you enjoy the life that you live? Because if you enjoy the life that you live, I'm hoping that you will be a better person as a result of it. And I hope those results will make a better society so I can actually leave an imprint larger than just how I was able to invest the client's money.
Do you think that the reason why many financial advisors don't necessarily take that step is either because they have a more general practice where they have people from many different professions, and they just don't have the level of skill set to be able to advise them in all these different areas? Or perhaps they're just lazy. They say, hey, you know what? Let me go ahead and just focus on what I'm doing. I don't want to go ahead and take too much risk, because if things don't fall in place the way that it should be, then that's my behind, right? What do you think is the reason why?
I think having a niche or a niche in a space helps within that because I understand what you went through for college and learning, and we'll go into that. I think that there's a part of it. But I also think there is a self selection that happens. There's nothing wrong with shopping at Walmart.
Mhm.
There's nothing wrong with shopping at Whole Foods. It's the experience that you want. And a lot of people aren't making an informed decision when they find an advisor, but hopefully the advisors are marketing in a way that suits that client. There are some clients where having a 0.5% return is the most important thing to them. Okay. And hopefully there are clients in the case where enjoying their money, enjoying their life, enjoying being able to pass down money in a sustainable way to the things that they care about and love is important to them as well. So there's nothing wrong with how an advisor approaches as long as they're marketing and putting themselves out so that the consumer can make an informed decision.
That's awesome. And it's funny because you you would think that, speaking to you, you would think that you had your whole entire career finance, because of some of all those things that you know and the way that you're able to articulate them so well. One would actually forgot that you started your career as an accountant,
Yes.
right? So, and you've been there for about 7 years, right? So talk to me, what was the experience like for you as an accountant, and what made you decided to make that change to start R as a digital advisor?
So, as an internal auditor, so of course it was during a recession, so I was applying everywhere. So I didn't read the description of what the job entailed. It was a full time salary job at a reputable company. That's all you needed to tell me. And the people I was around, I really enjoyed. So my first job was internal audit, and we audited our distribution center. So that's like I mentioned earlier. I was able to travel to different parts of the country and review their books to make sure that they were claiming their rebates appropriately.
Mhm.
So I was there for 3 years, and I enjoyed that job. It was not that stressful, pretty relaxed and laid back. I also did something called Toastmasters during that time, which I highly recommend anybody who wants to be in a leadership role, want to improve their interview skills. Toastmasters was a complete game changer for me. So doing that internal audit, I was there, but I was an accountant and I missed finance. So I was like, what is something adjacent to accounting that still had some financial principles I could apply? And there's a area in kind of corporate finance which is called financial planning and analysis. So
Mhm.
after 3 years of internal audit, I spent about 4 years in financial planning analysis. That's where I was able to improve my analysis skills. I also got to work and support different departments like sales, operations, marketing, and getting that experience from a financial standpoint, being able to have to articulate the numbers and tell the story behind the story, I think forced a level of maturity. Also, the FP&A world is an actually more mature world, which I was working with mature professionals who had been in the world for a long time. And let's just say they didn't play around. So you had to make sure your numbers were tied, ticking tied, and everything matched up. So it put an extra level of rigor, which I apply in my financial planning world today.
So then you decided to go ahead and leave that and start your own firm. Why?
That is correct. So when I was, let's take a step back. When I was in that internal audit job, I found out a designation called a chartered financial analyst.
Mhm.
And I was thinking of, should I receive my MBA? Should I go, different certifications I have? Should I go have a CPA because I was an accountant at the time? But I read something called the CFA, and it was like investment professionals. It was the gold standard. It was the hardest test there was out there. So I went to my manager and I said, hey, I'm thinking about taking the CFA. And she gave me a blank stare. She said, are you sure you wanted to do that? And at that time, I thought I was bright. So I was like, there's no test out there that I can't tackle. So I was like, I'm going to go ahead and register for that exam. And trust me, it was one of the most humbling experiences that I've ever had. And we can touch on that if you would like. But while studying for that exam, there was a term called wealth management. And what it was managing an individual's wealth. So I've been working for corporations, helping them manage their books. I didn't know I could do this for individuals. I didn't know that it was a career path, and I didn't know how lucrative it can be. So once I learned about that segment of the investment industry, I was all in. I kind of jumped. My parents thought I was crazy. My associations, my network thought I was crazy. But if I didn't make this jump, because I was around 29, if I didn't make this jump before I was 30 years old and had a family, when would be a good time? So that's why I decided to make the jump.
That's awesome. And to be honest with you, like you and I have very similar background, right? Because even when I was working at this huge wealth management firm at Merrill at that time, um, and it was two designation. It was either the CFP or the CFA, right? But then I took a step back and I looked around. I said, man, everybody have a CFP, but everybody's afraid of the CFA. Why? Right? And then I realized that okay, great, you got to read 10,000 pages. You got to put thousands of hours. Some people say 300 hours per session. That's not me. I'm, I'm my level hours is doubling for that for sure. And then, right, the things that you learn, right, the thing and that are applicable, and for you, you have both, right? So I mean, like you was not playing around. You say, look, I don't know which one I'm gonna get, but I'm gonna get both. So let's talk about both of those designations. Which one do you think was much more worthwhile for you, or you could actually look back and say, you know what, I'm more proud of that designation?
So if we're comparing the CFA and the CFP, the one that was more intellectually stimulating, the one that I felt challenged me the most and forced me to grow further than I could even imagine or wanted to, on top of that, it had to be the CFA. There's nothing that compares to the process of achieving that designation. I know they changed the rules now how they test it, but we used to have to go to downtown Atlanta, and there used to be people from all over the Southeast, and we would all sit down and take that test together. It'd be thousands of people in this convention center that was completely wiped down, so it's concrete and granite everywhere. When you're in that room, you could actually feel how smart and these individuals were. When you talk to them during lunch, these are some of the brightest minds that I've ever come across. And I was humbled to actually be taking the test with them. So the CFA is by far all those things. But the CFP, they do an excellent job marketing those marks, especially to consumers. So when we talk about a business, what customers can relate to and get their head around, I definitely think the CFP works. But for professionals in the industry, whether they're an estate planner, an investment professional, anything within finance, if they're aware of the CFA, you definitely receive a lot of kudos and respect of receiving that designation.
Which one do you think you use the most in your practice right now?
That's tough. That is tough. It would have to be the CFP, is what I'm using the most on a day in and day out basis. I think the CFA comes in when, which is surprising, the softer stuff, like what's important to individuals. How do you do a value based analysis on what's important and how do you prioritize? The intuition of solving all those formulas actually gives you intuition on how life works and how things are connected, which is what I wrote a lot about in my book, is how things are connected. But on a day in and day out basis, I think the CFP is more practical.
Makes sense. So let's talk about your entrepreneurship journey, right? So you got both destination, you started your practice. Like let's talk about the starting point and what were some of the barriers that you had to break through to get to the asset management industry, because beforehand you were managing assets or doing the books and accounting for companies, but not individuals. So how were you able to break through that industry? And let's talk about that process.
So it was, like I said, I jumped, 10 toes down, had no idea what needed to do. I just knew I love this area of finance and this is all I want to do every day and all day. And so I made the jump. Remember, I've been conservative with my finances for a long time. I have not had a month since I was working full time that my cash balance went down. So going out on your own and actually seeing your savings go down month after month, it was traumatizing. When you want to be a financial planner, you want to give advice, you have to have a license. And
Mhm.
there's many different licenses, and there's a lot of license tied to broker dealers. But if you wanted to be an independent practice, which I felt like was good for me because of the way I thought about things and how I wanted to operate, you had to receive something called a Series 65. So I sat down and took the Series 65. So I paused the CFA journey to sit and study for the Series 65, which I was able to achieve. After you receive your Series 65, which is a state license, you can actually register with the state of Georgia. You have to actually send them an application that says, I want to provide financial advice. And after they approve you and you receive your certificate through them, then you can actually provide advice. It's what we called in the state of Georgia a registered investment advisor, or RIA.
I think now, if you have the CFA, I think you could bypass that process now, because I think so I try to call them. I say, hey, look, like I'm almost there. I'm not there yet. I don't want to pay your fees. I don't want to go ahead and sit down for another exam. Can I bypass it if I do pass? They say, yeah, you just got to do some paperwork here and there, and then, that's fine. I said, great. 6 months later, I still haven't started. I'm not coming to this podcast. I think it's much easier because starting that business is not as simple as many would think, or starting any business, right? Especially at the very beginning, right? Not only do you have to have the software in place or the process in place, but you also have to go out and look for clients, right? And the unique thing about your firm is that your firm services are tailored to serve like behavioral health professionals by helping them overcome financial challenges and nuances in managing their career and building wealth. I think that's very hard to do, especially when you're such a young firm, right? So, like, first, what made you decided to serve behavioral health professionals, clientele, and what are some of the challenges and nuance they face?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. But I want to take a step back and let's talk about what it takes to gain clients in this world
Hmm.
as far as financial planning. I have to sit across from somebody who has saved, half their life or most of their life and say, trust me with your retirement assets. That is a big ask. Not only that, I'm not, I was just around 30, so I wasn't young, but I still had a young face. So when you say to somebody, trust me with your money, something that people hold dear, it is a challenge. So it was a long slog to even get in the door, let alone tell somebody that I could help you with your money. So I think that that isn't talked about enough as far as the challenge it takes to gain clients. Now, when we talk about the niche that I decided to work in, so I was asking everybody, hey, do you want a financial planner? Do you want a financial planner? I didn't have a niche at the beginning. And
Mm-hmm.
then I gained a counselor. And because of my practice and how I practice, I learned a lot about your career, what you want, your interest and hobbies. And she was explaining, how she went to school, what she did, how she services different clients. I was like, this is different.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in the South where mental health is not talked about, still not talked about a lot. I think now we have a little bit more of an awareness of mental health challenges and some of the, I guess, professional services aligned with that. But at that time, it was just a very small piece of my consciousness. But as listening to her talk, listening to the need, and learning about what these people, can earn and do, I was like, I think I can do this. I think I can make this a niche. So I decided to learn as much as possible. So to date, I actually speak to 3 what they call postdoc programs. And that's my way kind of to give back, to gain exposure in the mental health space. So before they even begin practicing full time, they've been exposed to some level of financial literacy from a business standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
some exposure to me as well.
So did you? Because I remember when I first started my practice years ago, and I think I was like 23, and I realized that my youth was not an advantage point. I said, when I still had hair, I still have hair. This is by choice, right? I cut my hair by choice. I said to myself, I said, you know what? I think I need to go ahead and gray a portion of my hair just slightly, just so I could look a little bit more mature. Did that ever come across your mind?
It did. I think where you dress, when I go to an event, not now, but especially when I start off, I always had a jacket.
Mm-hmm.
When it's questionable, I always put on a tie. I had to look as mature as possible at a lot of those events. But you have to learn. You have to be yourself.
Yeah.
You will attract what you attract. Remember the Walmart and Whole Foods example. Just be you, be authentically you. And you don't need to have a lot of clients in this business to have a successful practice. You just need the right type of clients. So if I'm generally who I am, if I show up consistently, I will begin to attract the right people.
So when you finally had your first client came into your practice, right? First of all, how did you get the first client? And what was the feeling like when the person finally decided to say, "Hey, you know what? I want you to be my financial advisor."
So, and I've done a lot of different like sales learning and all those things. And they say your first clients come from the 3 F's. And one of the F's is horrible, but it's going to be friends, family, and fools. Okay. And I change the F when I give a lecture and I say it's more familiar, right? Friends, family, individuals who are familiar with you.
Yes.
That become your first client. So it was actually a family member. And let me take a step back as far as being naive in this industry. So I thought this is when I came into the industry, Netflix was a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
I assumed that I was going to be the Netflix of financial planning. I could provide a low cost financial planning fee and serve the masses. As I gone on in my industry, that's not really a practical thing. So actually, my first client was my cousin,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, "Yeah, Randall, I need help in this area. Let's see what you can do." I laugh at those experiences now, but really being able to see the pressure and pain points that individuals have, I was able to be exposed to a lot of different people, of course, at a lower price point. But now at this point, I can almost justify the fee because of the experience I had early on.
So your first client was your cousin, right?
Yep.
He entrusted. Is he still your client now?
He's still my client.
I'm sure he's happy because he's still around.
He is happy, but I learned that there's a nice thing called asset under management, and because hopefully I was doing a decent job, he's been able to grow his wealth as well.
So how do you have those tough conversations with family members and say, "Hey, look, we're gonna have to park your money to this month because we don't think the market's gonna do very well, or you lost X amount of dollars," like, or whenever you have family reunion and you're trying to separate business from personal. Like, how do you have this type of conversation, and how do you separate the business from personal doing family functions?
So in this world, I think this is important for anybody who gives advice, counsels, even consultants. My clients are adults.
Mhm.
They, at the end of the day, are going to do what they want to do. My job is to sell them on who I am and my ability to get them further along where they want to go and potentially show them some other things that they want to see. So my approach was always, I'm going to let you be the adult. I think it goes back to my FP&A days where I used to send reports and present reports to different people higher ups. And it was not my job to make the decision. It was my job to present the information in front of them and say, hey, these are your pros and cons. What do you think we should do? Sometimes, if I felt really strongly, I would say, double check this option here. And
Mhm.
that's kind of how I work with clients. Similar to, I guess, a little bit of my upbringing. My parents did not say, do this and do that. They said, just be great.
Yeah.
That's all I ask from my clients. Be the best person you can be. Let me give you the money so that you can be secure and happy. So when we talk about working with friends and family members as clients, as long as they believe I want them to be happy and successful, even beyond just what the assets that I manage, it's really not a problem. Now, there are some harsh jokes that come about when the market's down. uh, and it's funny. I have a joke. I always say clients never call me when the market's up. I want the same energy when the market is up than when the market is down. But that's just part of the business. I think my joy, I have to believe this to keep on going, that when, they have a sense of financial security, when they lay down their head down at night, they're just happy that I came into their lives and that I was able to guide them in any way I could.
That's awesome. So now you have your first client was a family member, right?
Yeah.
How compare the feeling when you had another client that was not a family member, right? Was it the same feeling in terms of getting them aboard? Like, did you have the same satisfaction, right?
Yeah,
Because
it was, when they, the way my process is, they submit a fee. That's when they officially become a client. And then, you become humbled. You're like, me? Little old me?
what?
I guess I have to work now. No, no, it was an exciting feeling. It was one of those feelings. So there's different milestones you have in your business.
Mhm.
One is being registered, another is getting your first client. Then, like I said, a client that doesn't know you from Adam, like you are 100% a stranger. It almost verifies or justifies that direction that you're going.
Mhm.
So just having that client that was outside of my family that I didn't know, that had no connection to me at all, that say, hey, I trust you. I said, I can do this. And I can do this my way. Of course, with adjustments as time goes on.
That's awesome. And along the way, you decided to go ahead and start your own book, right? In 2018, you published a book called Hacking the System by Creating Your Own System. What inspired you to write that book? And why should I create my own system?
So one thing that I noticed, and I noticed this early on in college, the concept of compound interest. A lot of people have been society has kind of pushed people to spend money out of their pocket. Right now, the big thing is travel. So I just watched Delta's press release, and they had record sales in travel. While credit card balances are going up. So there, and if it isn't travel, it's going to be something else. So there's things in society that pulls money out of your pocket so that they can benefit from it. The question is, how can I do the opposite? How can I reverse engineer where money could come in my pocket? I can influence society in a way that is what I believe. Okay, do I have the funds and resources to give to the causes that I want to change, and how do I make that happen?
Mhm.
So that's why I decided to write the book. It was almost to solve a problem that I saw behaviorally that people were doing.
It's funny because my wife, she loved to travel. If she heard you say that, she'd probably slap me and then look at you funny. She's like, man, stop talking to this guy. I was still gonna travel. So it's like, how do you tell somebody, like you said, they're adults, right? That traveling is a passion for them, right? It's their getaway. But yet they love to use that credit card, right? And you know that over the long term time frame, right? Stacking your credit card and stacking all those debts, those revolving debt is not good. So how do you have that type of conversation with somebody that loves to travel, but they're using debt to be able to fund all that?
It's really about, like I said, like I did in corporate FBA, is putting the information in front of them. A lot of times they don't know another way to travel. A lot of people's travel concept is going onto a resort, unlimited drinks, sitting out on the beach. There are other ways to enjoy your life. So let me give you an example. So I had a client, they flew out to Thailand. I said, Randall, I'm about to go on vacation. I'm like, awesome, awesome. That's great. Have you ever thought about their therapist? Have you ever thought about connecting with other therapists in Thailand? Have you ever thought about sitting down with them saying, hey, this is how I practice, this is how you practice, let's learn from each other? It doesn't have to be the whole trip. It could be just half a day where you sit down and talk to them. Oh, guess what? You own your own practice. That's a tax write off.
Mm.
So how do you present in a way that we can all win? When I say all win, that's your pocketbook, that's your thrill to sit out on the beach, that's your hope, saying that. I mean, a lot of it is just telling people that I had this experience, so I could be in a network of people who had those experiences. So you're able to check that box as well. So it's more about where are the win-wins that we can have, that you can have a tax write-off, you and be able to travel the way you want to. So it's communication. It's understanding how different people do different things. I think one of the best part about my practice is I have a very diverse practice, and learning how different cultures handle money, how different business types handle money, it really allows me to kind of infuse that into other clients that I gain.
And just like you mentioned, it's a win-win situation for everybody, right? I think, and to me personally, I didn't even think about it potentially being a tax write-off, but I think that it also creates a form of diverse network, right? In terms of like geographical diversity, where now you've been in a relationship with someone that is outside your country, right? And I know that that's one of the things that you mentioned. Um, and how important is that to have that diverse network, and how important is for clients to think about alternative ways to not only travel but also just to do certain things, because obviously knowledge is power, right? And for you to be able to have the knowledge to share that with them, I think that's very unique. So I'm curious, like, what's the, like, in terms of level of importance, like how important is that to be able to do those things?
I think you have to step outside your box. Similar to, like I said, my story of going to a different school district, um, you know, working in different areas. If you want different results, you have to do different things.
Hmm.
If you look around and you say, hey, I want that result, what is that person doing? And you have to experiment. So in my practice, if I see an opportunity, I don't go barging in to say, hey, do this, and this is how you should do it. I say, have you thought about this? Why don't we just allocate some funds toward that, and let's just see what happens. And now I can't first day suggest that. I have to instill some trust in them. I have to say, hey, well, he's been gaining me some wealth. It's nothing for me to throw $500 at that venture or that thing. So after I've gained their trust, I think just having them try different things, experiment, something as simple as applying for another job. There's some opportunities, especially in the mental health space, that they can literally, and they have, double their income,
Wow.
and it's all because they applied. So you don't know what you don't know, and I definitely think trying different things help out. People say, I want, exposure, and they default to exposure taking kids on a field trip to Paris. And I think that's a beautiful thing. But what about like exposure within what you're already doing? And I
Hmm.
think a lot of people get bored with the day-to-day grind. They don't tweak and experiment within their lives. And that's kind of what I do is I say, hey, have you thought about this? Let's try that within my client relationship.
That's cool. So in your book, chapter 13 is titled Invest in Yourself and Your Life's Work. How should one invest in themselves and their life work in this digital era?
So in the CFA study, there's a big thing called human capital. It's kind of drilled into our head, and
I'm
I
still
took that
thinking about it.
yeah, it's trauma. We've all have trauma for that test. Human capital is really about how can I maximize the potential income or revenue in the future. That's all what human capital is. So let's say if I'm here today, How can I bring as much income as possible? And then with that, what other options in CFA, we learned that options have value.
Mhm.
If I expand my options, not only will I have more value, but I have different routes I can take. And I believe that gives a lot of people more fulfillment. So when we talk about investing yourself, it's really invest in the means to gain more income. And what a lot of people miss about that is relationships. We we live in a world where you can Google information in a second. You think, well, I could just YouTube everything. But old school relationships still matter. Some of the best advice that I receive is me sitting across from somebody. We're drinking a glass of wine. I say, I have this problem. He said, have you tried that? When somebody can intimately know your situation, look across you and I and say, hey, try this, that's invaluable. So please, as part of investing yourself is also part of investing in relationships. You do have to go on those dinners that may be a little bit more expensive than you want. You do have to take time out of your day to do X, Y, Z. But focus on relationships, focus on your skill sets, and also focus on getting different exposure beyond drinking your Mai Tai on Jamaica resort or playing golf.
By the way, I love Mata. I think that's like one of the number one drink for Caribbeans. I love Mata. Oh
Well, you
man.
should own your own Mai Tai company, right?
Yeah, I don't think I do so well. I just like drinking. I don't think I like producing it. So now, do you think that it creates some sort of barrier when you have to network with someone, right? And like through Zoom compared to sitting in front of them, having a cup of tea or having or coffee, right? Do you think that there's a way for you to have that same level of interaction?
I don't think it will be the same. It'll be different, and it doesn't mean it will be less fruitful or not or less impactful. I just think there are different touch points. We've all been in a Zoom call where we've been bored to death, but we've also been in a Zoom call where it was very interactive. They popped up a quiz, they showed a short clip of a video. It was very immersive inside the experience. So if you plan on doing a digital relationship, just use the different tools in the digital world to create that immersive experience. But there's no substitute. We're talking about caveman days, smelling somebody else's pheromones, knowing that I feel safe. You can't replicate that, unfortunately, in this world. So leverage the digital world, leverage IT and self learning, but don't neglect that old school blocking and tackling relationships of talking to people.
That's awesome. So outside of all that you have mentioned to us from your running your practice, from business or even talking to clients, like what do you enjoy doing to free your mind from not working
So as
when
a
you're not
business owner,
working?
you're not allowed not to work. I'm playing. The I do something. I've been doing it for about 10 years now. It's called Chicago style stepping. It's a type of ballroom dance. So that's let's take a step back. So when you're in business, you have to have some type of therapy because there's so many ups and downs. One of the areas that I do is, like I said, Chicago style stepping, which is a type of ballroom. I'm very big into athletics, so playing basketball, lifting weights, things of that nature. And sitting back, reading a book, and spending time with my wife. Those are what I like to call my getaways from this world because it's tough. You always feel like you're on. You never know when the next interaction could be your next best client. So finding ways to turn off is hard for an entrepreneur, but I try my best to do those things. My wife thinks I do a horrible job, but I do try.
But even running your practices as a financial advisor, they say that your life becomes your practice,
Yes.
right? I mean, it's a lifestyle type of
Yes.
business, right? Even when you go on a vacation, I had certain people that had their own practice where they would literally go to vacation with their clients and they would enjoy themselves. And a lot of times, they really don't have to pay for much because their clients had a investment property, right? Right there. So I was like, man, it's just so it's a very fruitful relationship to have to really just I don't know, provide value in your business, but also in your personal, right? Because I think that having that relationship, sometimes you have to get personal with your clients. right? Where you have to make that introduction to your wife, and they have to know how you live in, and you have to know how do you live in because you're getting the chance to know their personal, right? Uh, so it's awesome. So before we actually wrap this up, I like to ask my guests one final question, and I want to go ahead and ask you that question. So when it's all said and done, how do you want to be remembered as?
And this is a little bit of my big headedness, but I want to be known as one of the greatest financial minds that was ever raised in the state of Georgia. And not only that, but I utilize that financial mind to improve my community as I saw fit. So to me, just knowing the information is not good enough. How did I instill it? How did I share that information? How did I enrich a lot more people than myself? So that way I feel like my legacy lives on, which is my knowledge on how to grow wealth and hacking the system.
And I think you were on the way for that. So, Randall, I really do appreciate you for taking the time to join us in this session of our podcast. It was wonderful having you here as a guest, and I look forward to having you on future podcast episodes.
Thank you very much.
Stop. Okay, it's gonna stop.
Where the cash at, Uncle Money?